Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Unlocked podcast. I am here with a fellow lifestyle designer and now good friend, Liz Ference. Liz, I have to say thank you for joining us, of course, on the podcast, but also thank you so much for such a tremendous experience. Liz went through the work over the last few months, almost like 6 months now, that we've been talking and working together and building and doing incredible things together. And it's just been such a joy and a gift to get to know you and to do this work together and to have this kind of blossoming relationship in all aspects and areas of life. So thank you. We so appreciate you. And I especially appreciate you.
Oh, well, I don't know why you're thanking me, but I appreciate that. And obviously, I owe you a huge thank you for everything that we have been through together over the past few months. It's been quite a ride.
It really has been a ride. And I have to say this little note, just to give you a sense of who Liz is. And this is just coming up because it's just so top of mind. Liz sent us the sweetest book for me and the boys and for Phil that we can read. And it was this picture book. And it's just so thoughtful. And she sent it, we got it on Sunday, I think, and had such a thoughtful, detailed note in it about the work that we've done together, and just the detail orientation of your genuine thoughtfulness is incredible. And the fact that you took the time to do that and to send that our way, and something that we can now read with the boys, just so meaningful. So I just want to shout that out because I think it's those little touches that you do that not everybody thinks about. So that's something I needed to
That's
share.
very sweet, but I couldn't not send it to you because when I was reading it, it reminded me way too much of you and just all the little phrases. And I mean, there were even little things in there where I was like, I feel like Krista maybe coined this and she should have copyrighted the phrase before this person wrote about it. But I mean, yeah, I love picture books and I love that they can introduce these concepts to kids at such a young age. And I'm actually really interested to see what comes into the picture book market around all of this like personal growth stuff that's happening, and maybe strategic planning for life. Maybe there's a picture book in your future. I don't know.
It's so wild that you say that. I feel like you're a psychic. I don't know if we've talked about this, but it is something that is, and maybe not a picture book, but definitely a kid's version. I have a little drawing of it in my journal with a tree in it, with adventure. I mean, it's a whole thing.
Oh, that's perfect. You've got the vision started there, and we got to start them young on these concepts. And
I know. I don't know. You're the writer. You are the book writer. So I would need all of, your guidance and wisdom as we go. And that's something interesting to bring up as we get started on this topic. And before I do that, can you remind me, I do not have the book with me right now. And do you remember the title of that picture book that we're talking about?
It's called Finding Muchness. I don't remember the author.
Finding Muchness. So listeners, if you're listening, and if you just want something that's heartwarming, either for yourself and also for your children as you're reading with them, Finding Muchness is such a sweet, incredible book. And you're right, every phrase just makes you go, oh, yes, this is so good. So go find that.
I want to like gift it to my employees. I want to give it to grownups. It's like this perfect little thing. I love it.
So perfect. And it's so concise. And you're right. It just really takes everything that we talk about in these podcasts and what you and I have talked about in all of our conversations, and it condenses it down into this very consumable feeling. Like you can really feel the words because they're so concise. And it really encapsulates all of these big philosophical concepts in a really unique, cute way that even kids can understand and feel.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So Liz is the go-to person for good picture books and books of all kinds. This is something that is actually a big part of our journey talking about writing. Liz has a background in writing and publishing and writing books of all kinds. So we can dive into that a little bit. But before we do that, I really want to ask you, and I think it's helpful for people to understand, as you were coming into meeting us, Alan Key, Phil and I, and getting introduced to strategic planning for life, where were you? What were you thinking about? What brought you to that meeting and that connect point with us before we kind of got started, just to kind of frame up everyone's minds around where you were when you got started as compared to eventually what we'll talk about in a little bit as to where we are now.
Yeah. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and I was trying to recall who even referred me to you, because I know it was a referral, but I'm totally blanking on who it even was. But essentially, I had been doing the same thing at Mattel for a very long time, doing HR communications for probably 10 or 12 years and was getting ready to embark on this whole different thing. I had pitched this idea to my boss at the time, who's our CPO, to kind of stand up this sort of life coaching program and focus more on the employee experience. And she just greenlit me right there in that meeting, which was fantastic. And then I set off on this journey to figure out, okay, what have I gotten myself into? I need to actually become a coach. I need to be coached. I need to understand the process. And as I was researching people, someone kicked me your way. And I just remember looking through your website and thinking, this is really different. This is very different from the other things that I'm seeing. And just this intentionality and the strategic piece of it really spoke to me from what we're trying to do at Mattel in terms of being so intentional with things. And just it spoke to me in terms of just personally for your life, and how I love the way, I think it was Phil was the first person I heard explain how it's, we do this for business, and we have budgets and we have employees and we have all these things, but we don't actually do the same thing for our lives. And there's no reason why we shouldn't, because all the same principles are still there. And so it just really, it connected with me. And then obviously the first time we talked, I knew you were my person for this. So, it was an easy decision after that.
It's so true. It was that first conversation. It was so easy. It was just like, oh, everything we really connected on, much like we connected on that book and that we align on all of those phrases. It was like, we were just using all of those phrases and aligning so much on all of the topics, what you were looking for, what we were bringing to the table. And it just really meshed so well. And in fact, I think it was Reagan Walsh who connected us.
Yes, that's right.
Because you had been doing some research and figuring out which path was right for you and what you were looking for, because you have a big task. Can you help explain a little bit about, with this transition of where you're heading, what your task is in building at Mattel? What have you been thinking about? And especially even at that time, that big picture of what you're trying to do for this large global organization that's 36,000 employees, right?
Yes, I never know what the exact number is, but it's we're somewhere around there. And I think this all kind of came about we had our HR leadership team meeting, and our CPO just kind of threw out the challenge to think outside the box to creatively solve for this issue of burnout that everyone is experiencing. It's not just Mattel, obviously. It's, global, it's persistent. It's not something that is going away as we think like COVID is waning and coming back. It's not tied to that anymore. It is bigger than that, and it's not going away. So, we were doing the same thing a lot of other organizations were doing in terms of band-aiding and providing webinars about burnout and trying to, train our managers on recognizing the signs and symptoms and getting people help in kind of these one-off sort of ways. Offering them programs like Headspace, which are fantastic, but not really diving as deep as we needed to go. I think we're all learning that this to really get out of the cycle of burnout is it just requires a complete rewiring of the brain. And I think in order to do that, we realized it needs to be sort of a sustained program. It's not this, you might go to a webinar and come out of it and feel like, this is great, I've figured everything out. I'm going to tackle all these things. I'm going to change all these things. And then like 2 days later, all the same stuff is still there and all the same problems are still there. And you haven't gone deep enough. You haven't really flipped the mindset. It's not about, strategies. I mean, that's part of it, but it's not about like these things that you do. It really is about mindset and bringing that to everything you're doing every day. So, in terms of what we're trying to do at Mattel, we're trying to figure out, supporting these key populations that we know are really struggling right now. So our hourly workforce that's been, front lines of the pandemic, they've been there, while the rest of us have been working in our sweatpants, they have been toiling away in the office and keeping our operations running smoothly, but it takes a big toll on them. Our people managers who've kind of borne the brunt of hearing about this from all of their people and trying to support them, our HR teams who are kind of in the mix every day with all of this. And then, special populations like parents who are, especially parents of young children who are dealing with school closures and, close contact quarantines and and the endless stream. I mean, it was difficult to be a parent of a small child working before this, and now it is extra special hard. So really trying to design a multifaceted program that, you know, addresses all of these pockets and provides some good opportunities and resources. So part of that is connecting with great vendors like Owl and Key to sort of scale a little bit more beyond what I can do. And then also building some internal programs like coaching circles for certain groups of employees, and offer some one-on-one coaching, hopefully. Chris has been a great partner in helping me trying to figure all this out too. So figuring out where do those, you know, these strategic planning for life graduates, where do they go? What do we do with them afterwards? So lots of pieces to this. We're still building it. We're building the plane as we're flying, as we like to say.
Oh, and you are the best person to build that plane. I feel like so one of the things that Liz and I were really able to talk about through your personal experience was that your superpower is taking an idea and bringing it to reality. And so you are so well positioned to build an entirely new department and initiative to provide this service and to provide the support to all of the people that you're trying to serve. And you did then some very strategic things like becoming a coach and understanding what it's like to go through an experience like this, to actually then implement it at scale. So you took your ability, your natural ability to take idea and turn it into reality and just amplified it in such a massive way. But one thing you said in that when I was listening was, and you and I, and this is something I've loved about you and Mattel this entire journey, is that we speak the same language. When it comes to, you're like, we don't want the quick hit. We don't want the quick fix. We are not trying to just get the biggest bang for our buck with the smallest amount of time investment. We're trying to actually make meaningful, lasting change. And that comes with, like you said, that rewiring. And that comes with kind of going deeper than just like a 3-hour workshop. And so we so appreciated that, because that's how we've kind of designed ourselves and our offering, is to say it takes time to actually rewire your brain and start thinking differently. And you have to go below the surface. I mean, that entire first phase of our work is like going super deep on self and really understanding who you are and how you show up in life. And when you all were having conversations about, I think where people might get caught up is that in order to rewire your brain and to do the meaningful work and to access the impact, you actually have to spend the time doing it.
Yeah.
So go ahead. What were some of the constraints that you felt with that?
Well, it's just interesting because I feel like we are all so obsessed with time right now. And I was too before all of this. And you and Krista and I, even in figuring out how do we launch this to our employees, when we looked at like how we described the time commitment, I even was like, ooh, that's a little scary. Let's reword this in a different way. And it's because we know what this reaction is from people. It's like, I can't possibly add one more thing onto my plate. So I think there's this temptation from organizations who, you know that their people are feeling the same way. They look at something like this and think, well, I don't know if I can bring this to my people. I don't know if we can commit to this kind of time. You know, maybe we're better served by a half-day workshop or something like that. And these are easier things to swallow. And they, you know, it's true, you do get some benefit out of those, but like I said, you walk out just like floating on air, and then it all just comes back in. And unless you are willing to, you know, put the time aside. And I will say, I was one of those people who thought I could not add one more thing to my plate. And then we just started doing these, and they were on the calendar. And there were definitely weeks where it was difficult to get through, but I absolutely made it a priority and did it. I think you were maybe the only person that I got out of my bathrobe for when I had COVID to actually like come. And I never missed a week, right? Like we never rescheduled. And it was just that critical and that worth it. And it pays you back time-wise, you know, 100 times over. So.
And to give everyone some context, it's not like you're kind of just floating around in life, doing your job and really doing nothing else. I mean, you have a full plate. You have 3 young children, you have your job, you have your passions and interests, you have your husband. You are so dedicated to making sure that people experience, whether it's your friends or your family, that they have really meaningful experiences. So you're constantly thinking about others. You're juggling so many more things. I can't even tell all the things that you're juggling, especially as you go through this massive transition of being able to support even more people. But when you, just for that context, I mean, you started and you added on a whole other level. And the reason why we did this was so that you could really experience it and
Mhm.
then start to think about, okay, would this be something that I would want to champion and send out to my team of people and to support them with? How have you thought about time? Maybe how has the transition of your concept of time changed from
Yeah.
when you started to while you're in it to where you are? So when we're really talking about like rewiring your brain, what was that practical journey of what
Yeah.
you experienced, especially thinking about time and priorities?
I think the biggest sort of like aha for me at a certain point was that like I just kept thinking if only I had more time, that would solve everything. And so there was this like I'll be honest, I was so burnt out at a certain point where it felt like my only option was going to be to either quit or go down to like a very part-time thing. I could not get my brain around a solution that did not involve just I needed like these huge swaths of time. And then you sort of realize at a certain point, I'm not sure how we realized this, but we did it together, where it's not the amount of time, it is the quality of that time. And if you think about anyone who has spent an entire day with small children knows you don't need an entire day with small children. It's fantastic to have a few quality hours. Even that maybe is too much at certain times, to be honest. But I think the problem is so many of us, close our laptop, we go down and start rushing through dinner and we're doing all the things, we're taking them to sports. And it's like, that is not quality time because we are still in sort of stress mode, thinking about work or not able to like set our boundaries appropriately to cut off and say, this is the quality time that we're spending here. Or you're spending that time in the same way every day where you're like rushing around dinner, sports, all those kinds of things versus trying to be more strategic and intentional about, okay, I have these, 3 hours after work every day before my kids go to bed. How are we using those? Are we like just shuffling through life in the same way every time? Or is it time to start thinking about maybe on, every Wednesday I take one of the kids out for a special date night, or, maybe on Tuesday I go out for a special date night with Drew and somebody else watches the kids. It just was really eye-opening to me that, when you really break it down, there are enough hours in the day. There really are. There's 24 of them. Like, we have enough time to work. We have enough time to sleep and do what we need to do with our kids. We're just not always using that free time as strategically as we could. So I feel like it takes that moment to stop and reset and think and be intentional about it. And if like, I would say that sums up this entire program is just like the intentionality, and that solves so many things in life, and time is a big one.
Oh gosh, the part where you said you just have to stop and assess and think about it and then set the intention, because we get so used to this going, 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 doing, doing, doing. And if I'm feeling like I'm not getting it all done, I just need to do more, 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 more.
Mhm.
But what you just said was that kind of that pause moment to say, okay, well, how am I using the time? How do I want to use it differently? Was there a moment in the process? And I'm trying to think back to when this may have been, but was there a moment in the process where you realized, oh, I know what my priorities are, and like where it was like a real big switch moment? Or do you think it just happened slowly over time?
I think I always knew that my family was my priority. I think some of the surprises that came along the way were, and you really helped me figure this out, was this prioritizing creative time and the space to be creative. And you talked earlier about superpowers, and I feel like what you did for me was hearing everything I was saying and then kind of naming it and giving me my superpower, which is something I never thought of before and definitely didn't realize I had or didn't know what it was. But this idea too of like me being a creator has been something that I really like have tethered onto, because it helps pull me out of the weeds on things and remind me that my time is best served using my superpower. And always being able to, but unless you've named it and you kind of think of yourself in that way, it's really hard in the moment to pull out of that. So I think prioritizing that creative time, and you and I have talked about this before, giving things space to breathe when you're doing something like creating an entirely new program like I'm trying to do, is not something you can do in between the like 10,000 emails and like the stress. And it's like, oh, I've got 20 minutes here where I'm not in a meeting. Let me strategize about what this program scale is going to be. Like, that's not how it works. Like, you need some space and time to do all of those things. And I think, so prioritizing that space to do that, and then prioritizing, realizing that this creativity thing is not just I've got like the creative side of my brain for work, but in my personal life and writing. And I never before made the connection between that sort of filling me up and giving me energy to do the work. And when I don't have time to do that, or I say that I don't have time to do that, I find myself just kind of sliding further into kind of just that, like, I'm in go, go, go mode and head down, sort of not looking up and out of the tunnel. And, taking time to work on my writing, which is completely unrelated, but somehow always, if it definitely gives me energy for work things, but it's completely unrelated, but in some ways it always there's this like spark or something that I'm like doing that. And I think of something for work. And sometimes my best ideas are happening when I'm not technically working. I'm like doing things that are on my personal time. So, but that's how that's the whole point, is that this is also connected. We've been trying for so long to like separate work and life. And like, that's not how it's going anymore. That's not how it's going to be.
Oh, and you're hitting on, like, you're giving me chills as you're talking, because you're hitting on what you set out to do initially in the first place. Is this burnout really comes from us trying to go 100% on 100% of the things 100% of the time. So we're trying to do all the emails and do all the work and rush over here in the work front. Then we're trying to do it over here on the personal front. Then we're trying to do it over here in our passion or this other thing that's on the other side, and then renovating the house. And what you just hit on was, there is integration. We're not going to go 100% on 100% of the things 100% of the time across the board. We have to kind of stop, pause, and then look, okay, I'm a creator. I'm talking about you. You're a creator, and you're a creator in all of these areas. And so by you creating at work, you then build energy and momentum. And then by creating at home and with the kids, you build energy and momentum. By creating from on the book and putting even a structure together in a new way, like, you're creating momentum and energy. And then you might be in the shower and then you get this idea. I think what we forget is that, especially in today's world, and I know this used to be the case too, is that all day long, we're kind of thinking about all the things. We're never disconnecting. We're never disconnecting from the digital front or from the responsibilities that we have. So we might be mowing the lawn and thinking about that work problem and then jumping online or doing whatever. We're never taking that pause and stopping to kind of bring ourselves back to that center point, and then saying, okay, now I'm going to intentionally put time and energy into these places from my authentic place, so that when I'm giving, I'm also receiving energy. Right? That 100% of time, 100% of things, that feels like I'm just giving, rushing, and not getting a lot in return. But for a creative, which you are, you need to be able to create from that superpower and then get that return from whatever you're doing. And then that allows those ideas to pop up at all random times.
Right. And I feel like that, initially when we started this, our weekly meetings were that was my hour where it was the space to like let the ideas come, and things came out of, certainly like you get those aha moments when you're doing the homework for this, but when you are actually like talking to you about it is a whole different level, because you're pulling things out, but also like hearing yourself talk, you come up with the ideas yourself as you're talking through these things. And it's like, that was the space that I needed to be forced to put on my calendar. And then after it's all over, you have to figure out, how do you, like, what's next? Like, how do you continue to have that space and make that space? Cause I already can see, like, I can tell when I'm going off the rails on not having that time and being in the tunnel. And I think that's like the greatest gift of this program, is like that moment that you can just say, I'm off the rails and I know how to get back. Like, I have this tether to what I know is critical for me to, fill up my energy levels to be able to do my best. And I just, didn't have that tether before. I didn't have that understanding of what was out there.
Oh my gosh. I mean, just that alone just gives me so much life and joy, because that awareness, and I can just relate. And that's why it gives me joy, is because I can relate. Even as we're going through the process of the home build and coming to the end of that phase, I can feel myself getting pulled away from, oh, what the, the word, look at that nail hole. And what about this? And that's not going to be done. And that's all these little details
Yeah.
that, from my spacious being of my superpower, like it just drains the crap out of me. I
Right.
can so relate to that feeling of like, oh, but if I just come back, I have this tether, and it kind of pulls me back in, brings me back to center, allows me to get back into that creator place, that place where like I know I have the ownership and the ability to navigate forward. And
Mhm.
there's so much peace of mind. It's so much space and peace of mind to kind of come back to that place and be able to move from there, instead of moving from the reactionary standpoint.
Yeah. It does. It feels so good. It just feels so easy. And it's a weird thing when you realize what you are or what you're best at, and to know that you can do that all the time, or like most of the time. You don't need to be doing things that drain you and empty you, because that's not the best use of your time. So it's it's such a weird, like easy sort of like peaceful feeling, like, oh, I need to focus on the things that I'm best at, and that's what's going to create the best result for whatever, your family, your company, like what, however you're giving back.
So how have you kept yourself tethered since you've left the program? I mean, clearly we've been continuing to work together to bring all of this work to the employee base at Mattel. So that
Yeah.
kind of helps, because we're constantly talking about the work. But what other things have you done, as because you're writing a book, you're creating this entire program, you're taking care of all three children during summertime, which is a whole initiative. You're creating potentially new renovations on the house. You're doing all these things. So how are you kind of keeping yourself tethered? Are you doing weeklies, monthlies, daily check-ins with yourself? What are some practices that you're using to help stay tethered?
Ooh, daily check-ins would be great. I am not doing a daily check-in with myself. So I will say I have, when we go back to that sort of rewiring, I think it's important to note that like once you're rewired, it's sort of like it's a semi-permanent fix. Like you have to kind of keep like maintaining yourself, but that base is there, and you can tap into that, once you have that. And I feel like there are definitely times where I can recognize in my work that I am starting to, get way too deep into the details, or I'm like obsessing with trying to like run something through all the way to completion myself versus, handing it off, or, staying focused on the higher level and the things that I should be focusing on. So I feel like I am doing it on a daily basis where I'm seeing myself in the weeds, and I'm able to like do that zoom back where I'm like, okay, this is what I do. And I'm going to stop this pattern. So I would say it's there on the daily. I'm trying these days to look more at my week than my day. I can't, I know we've talked about these, like the daily non-negotiables and things like that. And the daily non-negotiable stresses me out, because I feel like any given day is tough at this, when you have got kids of this age, during a national nanny shortage situation. But looking at the week and saying like, I know I have more time on this day or that day. I have to prioritize making time for creativity, or I have to set these things aside, and this does not need to be done tomorrow. And I lost track of what the question was. We were the tether back and the daily and the check-ins and things like that. So I think I do want to get more organized with having, but going back and reading the headlines. So when I knew I was going to be talking to you, I actually went back and read through all of my homework, and there were some things in there that I had forgotten, and so I think that's the way your program is designed, is to make sure that you're always kind of checking back and reading through those headlines and making sure that you're staying true. And on some level they should be ingrained, but it does help to go back and read the words that you wrote, and remember like the space that you were in when you had those realizations. And so it's a great check back to refer back to.
It is. I always say it's a gift from my former self to my current self,
Yes.
because you're in like this different state of mind when you do the work. You're in kind of just fully in it. And
Yeah.
it's whole different, you're in your being and in your truth and your essence. And so then you build that foundation from that place, but then life happens. And I so appreciate you sharing, how you kind of get off track and then come back to it, because we all do. We're human. We're going to go run off and go do life. And then when we come back and, like you said, we read those things, there are things that we forgot about, or sometimes just not everything can be focused. Not all of those headlines can always be the top priority. And so coming back and reflecting on them, at least for me, always helps me to say, like, okay, this is my foundation. It brings me back to that feeling and to that place. And then it allows me to consciously choose which ones are going to be my focus right now over the next month. Where am I going to put my energy, my effort, my all of my creativity? Where am I going to put it? Not always just one or two things, but really, again, coming back to that intentionality, I'm going to consciously choose which path I'm going to take over the next month, because over a 12-month time frame, 24 months, however much longer after that, over a lifetime, the compounding nature of that intentionality, really, you look back and you're like, wow, so much has been done, and I felt really good doing it. So have you also felt, as you've been deploying this in your life and you've been scaling this initiative, and not just this specific program, but the entire program that you're building, are you feeling better as you're doing all of this work in your life?
Yes, absolutely. That point about like when you look back at everything that has happened, it's sort of, you were having a conversation with my boss, and I remember you saying something like, me bringing ideas to reality, and him saying something like, and so fast. And I was like, is that true? And then I was just like thinking about what we've done this year and how we've already launched some of the programs, and like you and I are getting ready to launch, imminently. And like, this is moving fast. I mean, sometimes it feels like, it's not necessarily moving as fast as you want it to. And then you turn around, you're like, holy cow, these were like big hurdles that we jumped over, and these things are happening, and we're doing good things. So, that's always really fun to look at. But yeah, I think, to your point earlier about that gift from yourself and looking back and like the space that you were in when you wrote those things, it was really funny reading through those. And just, I loved I had something in there about one of my goals was to take a week-long vacation. And I actually wrote a note to you that said, this is physically painful for me to write, or it was take a week-long vacation and not check email. And I said, this is physically painful for me to type these words, because I had not taken more than like, I don't know that I've ever taken more than like 2 days away from email ever since we've been, connect in a digital world where we can connect. So that was like really life-changing for me. And I remember you really pressing me to not even take my laptop, which made me very uncomfortable. And we compromised by me taking my personal laptop, not checking email. And once you do it once, it's such a freeing feeling, and it didn't matter. There was nothing that happened that couldn't, like the building didn't catch on fire. And even if it had, I wouldn't be the person to call, but people know how to reach you. And, but the freedom and space that gave me, and for me to come back so like recharged and ready to go, I came back in such a better space than I've ever come back from any other trip or anything like that. And it's, it's these realizations where it's just like, this just feels good, and it's working, and it's all for the better. Like it's win-win. It's not like there's just a pile of work that didn't get done while I was there this week. It's like, I benefited from taking the time away and coming back, and came back with ideas. I probably came back with more ideas than I would have had if I'd been just grinding away at work the entire week,
Oh my gosh, especially when coming back to connecting the dot of you being able to bring an idea into reality and do it so quickly, which that is a point when it comes to especially teams or partners going through this work together, that those reflections from teammates or bosses or leaders, that gets to happen, that sharing of like, wow, you don't see this of yourself, but I need to give you that gift to show, like to say, even he didn't even intentionally say that in that conversation, meaning like I don't think he knew when he said that it was going to mean anything in your brain, that he probably knew that, but you were like, wow, that was kind of cool to have that reflection. I do.
Totally.
Right.
Right.
But to connect that dot with going away and not having email. It gives your brain the space to breathe, going all the way back to connecting the dot about giving things space and time to breathe, to be able to take that time away. And then I bet when you come back with all those ideas and that momentum, that refreshed momentum, you move even faster or just as fast. And you know me, I'm not a big proponent of like move fast, clearly.
Right.
But for someone who can bring wonderful, amazing ideas to reality in such a thoughtful, detail-oriented, genuine way, and a meaningful, impactful way, those breaks are so important to the creativity and
Right.
the ability to bring something to fruition. Because if you're burnt out and don't have space for it, and you just keep doing the emails while you're on vacation and trying to juggle the kids and trying to do all the stuff,
Yeah.
you come back and you're so drained that you want nothing to do with trying to create momentum because you're already exhausted.
Yeah. And like, it's all tied together. It's all tied to understanding like who you are, understanding that like, if I am that creator, I need that space. And, you know, that point about you're hearing things reflected back to you, and it really resonates with you, and it changes how you think of yourself and how you then choose to organize your time or organize your commitments and things like that. And it's just really interesting because all this stuff is inside of you. Like you, Krista, did not go out and like interview my coworkers or anything like that. Like anything that you learned about me, you learned from me, but like I didn't know these things about myself until you reflected them back to me, and in just a more sort of like consolidated, concise way that was like an easy thing for me to like. I love this idea of a tether and like something to like hold on to, like, because when you are in the tunnel or in the weeds or whatever, it's just this thing that's like there, and you're like, like I'm just gonna grab onto that, and like that's who I am. That's what I need to go back to.
Gosh, it's so valuable. And you're so right. It exists within everyone. It's just, that's why we say it's not a how-to. It's just an opportunity. It's a space provider. It's a space creator. It's almost a mirror. So
Yeah.
even if you're going through it by yourself, just being able to write the thoughts down that are always in your head, always kind of there behind the scenes in a productive way, and then to see it all piece by piece be built over time into something that you can then go apply in life and integrate into life. It's like, oh, okay, this all already existed in me. Now I'm just using it to my advantage and applying it.
It's this like power consolidator or something, like a supercharged vitamin or something. Like all the, you know, everything is in there, but it's this easy, like just compact way to like, I feel like we need bite size. We need something we can hold in our brains from 10,000 feet, you know? And it's like, that's what it is like, I'm this person, these are my priorities. And like, but you've distilled that down from like a million things to get there, you know?
Yes. And that is one thing that I'm so grateful for, because we do force function down to very simple. No, you only need to have 5 to 7 topics on your values or your lifetime. You can't have 50 because you'll never remember 50. But
Right.
you remember 1, you might remember 7.
Yeah.
And you can always kind of come back to that and reflect on it. So that simplification. So as you think about with all of this that you learned in the experience, and as we're gearing up for and ready, and maybe by the time we launch this episode, we'll already be kicking off with the teams, but
you might be.
As you're thinking about in the seat that you are sitting in, it is such a powerful, important seat that you're sitting in and creating this for so many people. And I will get emotional just thinking about the fact of like the ripple effect that you're making in people's lives beyond just their work, right? By you doing the work you're doing, and this goes back to your mission statement, helping people live their best lives, but that because you're doing this, you have the ability to create a ripple effect for them personally, but then also for their families, generations. I mean, so many people, their communities, the people they're going to serve and support. So when you think about taking this work out to the broader team and building and doing what you're doing, why do you think that's important? What are you excited to share with your community at Mattel for them to take away from this work?
Yeah, I mean, ripples is such a good way to think about it. And I always love the new ROI is not return on investment. It's like the ripple of impact or whatever. But I mean, this is both. Like, I can't honestly think of a better bang for your buck program in terms of just the long lasting. I mean, like, put this up against any like development course I've ever taken, any webinar I've ever been, any conference I've ever been to. I mean, this just like blows it out of the water. I think people have no idea what they're in for when they start it, or how far reaching it's going to be. And so it does like completely blow my mind to think about, the number of people we're going to touch with this. And then not only them, but all of their family members, their kids, like the fact that we could, change the way people are organizing their time at home so that they're having more meaningful experiences with their family, with the people that they manage at Mattel, how they manage up to their manager. I mean, it's all so, it's like limitless, the changes that it can make. And the thought of this doing for other people what it did for me is like, yes, I'm going to get like a little teary-eyed thinking about it. I mean, it's just like, it's so exciting. And like, I'm just incredibly grateful that I have the opportunity to do it. I mean, this, like I said, this was just a crazy idea I pitched a while back and just got the green light right away. So, I mean, having those supportive people who believe in your vision is like, unbelievable. And I'm super grateful for the opportunities I've had and so excited for
That is
what's coming.
amazing. And thank you for sharing that and saying that. I want to take a minute just for people who are listening who might have that crazy idea within their own company and who are like, man, I wish I were Liz and that I were able to go pitch that and to be able to like implement something like that. And not just strategic planning for life. I mean, you're bringing in other partners and other providers and services and support systems for the team overall to help with this problem. You're puzzle piecing it together and providing coaching and, support systems, on call support, that kind of stuff. So if you're talking to someone who's kind of in a company and thinking, this is a problem that we have, and I wish I could pitch this, what advice would you give them? And, or like, what language would you give to someone like your boss to encourage people to bring these ideas to the table, to kind of help start moving this needle forward for employee well-being, employee and, overall wellness?
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
I mean, this is not new in terms of what people are trying to focus on. It's like everybody's talking about holistic well-being. It's out there. It's like the number one thing we need to solve for. I feel like this is such in some ways it's a creative solve, but in other ways it's just this like, duh, like what, like, of course, this makes sense. This is the way to tackle it. And I feel like, when you can prove the impact of it, and some people are going to be more focused on the people side of things and other people are going to be focused on the organizational side of things, but this hits both. When you have people, it's not just about taking care of your life. When you take care of your life, it feeds into your work. When you like, that gives you your passion and your drive and your energy. You fix what's going on in your life and feel like you've got things in order there, that's going to carry over into your work, and vice versa. Like if once you take care of things going on at work, you can have the space and freedom to do what you want at home too. I think, if you're someone out there who has any influence in the organization in terms of, having a responsibility for taking care of your people and for well-being, this is the future, I think. And this is such a critical lever. And, it's something that no EAP program, no headspace. I mean, all of these things are important and everyone uses them in different ways, but this is the thing that pulls everything together and is really just the only thing that can help you just start to finish, look at the whole picture. So I would say if you're considering pitching it, just pitch it. And I'm happy to connect with you on how to do that.
Yeah, I think that it's important to just hold the space for the fact that you are really kind of pushing the needle on where things are going in the future. It seems, at least from our outside perspective, with the leadership at Mattel, you have a really amazing leadership team that in talking with you, you all are collaborating on bringing these visions to life to make sure that they are in support, to support like creativity of the whole and the wellness of everyone. And it's really inspiring from someone who's not in that environment to watch how you all speak and the language you're using and how quickly they're buying in and supporting you on the idea, and then you're able to run with it. It's truly amazing. So I think I'm just putting that out there just because like our conversations have shown me a little window into the Mattel world.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like for me, just super supportive and kind of moving and progress, like trying to be progressive on these fronts and solve this problem, or solve this need when it comes to people. And so I'm kind of putting that out there for others who are listening to watch and to watch what Liz is doing out there and to be involved in these conversations, because there are solutions out there for this type of work. And I think there are a lot of people out there with really big hearts that have the same mission to help the people who are in these companies. And it's inspiring to see what you all are doing and how quickly you're moving on it and doing it so thoughtfully.
Yeah. And I will say too, I mean, any company can do this. You can just start being progressive tomorrow. It's what, if you are in a company who has always done things the same way for a long time, people are stuck in their ways. That doesn't mean you can't pitch this. That doesn't mean that you can't change and offer the best for your people.
I agree so much, full-heartedly. Okay, so we are wrapping up on time. Where can anyone who maybe might be in that situation where they're like, gosh, her story is inspiring, I would love to do this or something like this with my team, where can they find you? Where can I connect with you?
Yeah, I would love for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Would absolutely love to connect with people who are doing similar work or who are getting ready to, because as we mentioned, there's not many people doing this kind of work. So would love to connect with people who are and bounce ideas and grow together as we're figuring this out.
Amazing. Will you be speaking at any conferences on the topic in the near future?
Not that I'm aware of, but who knows?
I feel like that might be a thing coming up in the next 12 months, maybe on next year's strategic plan.
Who knows? Podcast today, conference tomorrow. I don't know.
You better watch out. It's coming for you. Okay, Liz, thank you so much for all your insights today, your wisdom, sharing, and just being such a good friend and human. You're doing incredible work, and it's really inspiring to get to be on your journey with you.
Well, thank you. I would not be doing any of this without you. And I definitely wouldn't be doing it at the level that we're doing it without you. So
Thank you, friend. All right, listeners, until next time, be well.